Hi, it's Peter Chapman, and I want to welcome you to another edition of our SKUFood Recipes for Success, which are presented by FCC. These sessions were designed to help food producers and processors in our industry, especially as they deal with some of the challenges and adaptations that you've had to make to your businesses with the onset of the whole pandemic in 2020. And as the marketplace starts to change and we see some more changes happening all the time, people are continuing to have to change how their business operates and get used to selling in a new environment. So we created these recipes for success as really our way here at SKUFood of giving back and trying to share some insights and help people really improve their business and adapt to the new challenging market. And really appreciate the people who have been joining me through some of the weeks. And this week, it's great to have Neil Stephen here from This Is Marketing. So welcome, Neil. Great to have you, and really appreciate you taking the time. And Neil's going to share some of his insights and great information about influencers today as we learn about something that's really generated a lot of interest, actually, as we set up the series in June on internet marketing. We had a lot of people asking questions about the influencer segment. And great to have Neil here and to share his experience. And Neil is the brand communicator and CEO of This Is Marketing. And he's the brand strategist behind Piece by Chocolate brand. And Neil and his team have helped small business brands understand and speak with their unique voice on the path to growth. And it's great to have people with those skills to help brands speak up, with that unique voice. And it is so it's busy out there, right? And we do need to find that unique voice. And so Neil's a graduate of St. FX in Antigonish, which actually is where my son goes. Oh, look at that. Oh, there's his big X ring. Yes. Oh, yes. You people from St. FX think that's so superior. Where I went.
We don't think it. We know.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. For those of you who are from outside Atlantic Canada, the people who go to that university think they're superior. When you go to one of the other schools, you say, what do people say who have an X ring? And they said, you want large fries with your Big Mac.
Oh.
So you see, we always gotta have a comeback, right? But so Neil is a graduate of St. FX, where there is a really solid business program, and my son just finished his first year there and had a great time and loved it. So so I know it's a great school, and he brings 15 years of brand-centric strategy to companies who are looking to stand out and compete with the bigger brands in the grocery store. And it is a challenge. The big brands have a lot of money to spend, and so we have to find ways. And a lot of times the advice I would be giving to a brand would be do what the competition can't do. So when the big brands can do some things, then if you're a medium or smaller size brand, then you've got to do what the big brand can't do. So, and I know Neil does a lot of work on that, and we're going to hear a little bit more about it today as we talk about influencers. And a little bit about SKUFood. It's an online community that's dedicated to working with food producers and processors. And what I try to do, my name is Peter Chapman. What I try to do at SKUFood is share the insights that I have from my time in retail. I started working at a store and worked with Loblaw companies for about 20 years in the merchandising and marketing and advertising parts of the business, and help producers and processors understand retailers, how they make decisions, why they do things. And since leaving Loblaw, I've had the privilege of speaking across Canada and working with different producers and processors. And if we didn't have all these travel restrictions, I'd be out with my shopping cart, traveling from coast to coast and having the opportunity to speak and work with different producers. I do have my small card here, which I keep just so that it reminds me, and it's always my symbol that you have to, success is getting your product into the shopping cart. We can do so many great things, develop great products, work on all these different initiatives, but if it doesn't make its way into the cart, whether it's a real one or a virtual one, then it's not going to be successful. So that's what I try to remind people about. And it's an exciting day here in Atlantic Canada today, because they did announce that we're now allowed to travel within the 4 Atlantic provinces starting July 3rd. So for those of you who are on the East Coast, a little bit of good news after some of these restrictions that we've all been living with. So I do want to as always encourage you to ask questions. We design our sessions to really deliver the best content we can for you, but if you have something on your mind or there's some information you're looking for, then this is the time to ask it while we have the experts here, and and we will do our best to make sure that we address those issues that are on your mind. And one of the great things that has happened with SKUFood as part of Recipes for Success is to be partnered with FCC on these sessions. And for those of you who might not know, FCC is the only Canadian lender that are 100% invested in Canadian agriculture and food. And I'm sure you're familiar with FCC's support of agriculture, which has been their core business, but they also support the whole ecosystem that surrounds that. And they finance food processors, manufacturers, wholesalers, distributors, equipment, and packaging suppliers. So the entire value chain in the food industry. And they do work with customers that are at every stage of the life cycle, right from artisanal producers and processors, right up to the large multinational companies who are exporting around the world. And they also offer financing options that include assistance with cash flow, equipment, inventory financing, expansion, construction, real property startup, diversification, and more. And as people are now starting to see the economy start to change a little bit again, having those good lending partners are critical to success. So I'm sure people are going to want to check out some of the options there. And one thing I wanted to remind you before we get into talking about influencers is that in July, we're going to continue with our Recipes for Success. And Susan, who works with me here at SKUFood, will post the link for our July series and in the chat so that you can have a chance to check it out. But really great lineup in July. We're going to talk about telling your story, and it's really continuation of our internet marketing. But I was working on a project in the past month or so, and I really struggled because some of the people I was working with didn't do a great job of telling their story. So we're going to devote 4 weeks in July to help producers and processors tell their story, tell it to consumers, and tell it to your customers. Some of it interacts, some of it's mutually exclusive. So I'm going to share some process with you and help you really get into that. So if you want to check that out, the link is in the chat for you to register. So Neil, I need to stop talking so that we can get to influencers and learn all the great stuff that you have to share with us. And so first of all, I want to say welcome and really appreciate you taking the time to be here today. I know you're busy with different projects on the go. So thanks for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
All right. So one of the things that that Neil and I were talking about as we were preparing was just how many of you are, engaged with sort of this part of the marketing world now, which is relatively new. And so I just want to start with a little poll and maybe just get a sense from you about how many influencers that you might be following yourself personally. And that could be for personal reasons. It could be for your work that you're trying to learn about it. So we just gave you a couple different categories there so that you could pick whether you follow 1 or 2, 3 to 5 or more than 5, or that you don't follow any. And so I'm going to leave it open there for another minute if people want to just make a selection. Just give you a second here. And it seems like, and I'll let me just share the results so you can see them. So it seems like it's split quite evenly there, Neil. We have about a quarter that people follow 1 or 2, 14% 3 to 5, and 27% more than 5. So really 3 out of 4 people are following influencers, and 1 out of 4 are not. So it's definitely good to see our audience are engaged with influencers. I'm not sure whether that would be, do you have a sense, would that be sort of indicative of the way the entire marketplace would be, that it would be probably about 3 out of 4 people would be following influencers?
Yeah, I think just there's probably about 35% of the marketplace that is not interested at all. Influencers, and yeah, those numbers seem about right to me. Influencers are ubiquitous with people's social channels. They're everywhere, and they're big content creators. So it makes sense to see see that number.
Okay. And the next, we actually had a couple polls, because first we wanted to understand how many influencers or if you are following influencers, but then we also wanted to see whether you're using this in your business right now. So it'd be great if you could just let us know if you're working with an influencer right now or not, and or perhaps you aren't right now, but you would like to. So just great to get people's input, and it helps us tailor the content and kind of how we're going to address some of the different things that we had designed as part of the session today. So it looks like we have, I'll just share those results so people can see. And so you can see on there that it's about 1 out of 4 people are working with an influencer now. 1 out of 3 are saying no, but they'd like to. A third or not, and then we have some people who are also support for food and beverage. So it is split, which we often find when we do the polls. So so you got a excuse me, a sense of the audience there. So Neil, the first thing for me, and to be honest with you, this is something that I've been learning about in preparation for the session today, because I felt as I was preparing, I didn't know enough. So how do you define these people that we call influencers out there?
Yeah, that's probably a pretty good place to start. First, just thanks everyone for popping on. Everyone's got a lot of places to be digitally these days, so it's nice to see you on this little corner of the internet. I should mention that there's a virtual trade show happening behind me here. Shane and Tom from Superfruit Puree, wonderful puree company here in Atlantic, Canada, are doing a virtual trade show with buyers throughout South America and throughout Asia. So that's what's happening back there. When it comes to influencers, I think that I did create some slides here. Maybe we should pop that up, just the first slide, give you a sense of where my head's at on this.
All right.
So I tend to think, and I should start this by saying, the influencer space today is more formal than it was a year ago, but it's still very, very new, frankly. And it's kind of the Wild West in many ways. So I always think of influencers in 3 ways. There's traditional, there's unaware, and then there's intentional. I'll start with traditional. Here's the good news. There's about 70% of folks on this call who haven't worked with an influencer before, or haven't but would like to. The reality is you've probably already worked with influencers. Traditional influencers are the things that we've grown up with and that everyone on this call already knows. Radio, television, newspaper, websites. These are all influencers. They all have audiences, they all have eyeballs, they all have attention. And you can interact with these organizations and these platforms to introduce your brand and your messaging to customers, right? The number one thing to remember when you're sort of delving into this space is that influencers are a tactic. They're a channel, very similar to all the traditional ways that you already know how to communicate and market your brand or your product or your business. So don't be afraid of it. Try to apply a lot of that similar thinking about what makes a good ad placement. Well, what makes a good ad, a lot of those variables transfer right over to what makes a good influencer relationship, what makes a good choice of influencer. So I always think it's important to sort of clarify right off the bat that you've already been doing much of this stuff. And a lot of the things that we're going to talk about, I'm going to sort of chat about today, are things that aren't crazy. They're not brand new. It's just a slight tweak about how we do it today. So there's the traditional folks, they're influencers. Then there's the unaware, and this is actually quite a large group. These are people who are all over social media, have large followings, and don't consider themselves influencers. Is there a sports team in your life that has a large following on Facebook? They are influencers. Politicians are influencers. People with large audiences across social media, they're influencers. Now, they might not consider themselves to be that, but they are. This is an interesting group of people to work with. They aren't out looking to find partners to work with. They aren't trying to sell their services. They're not trying to monetize their platform. Yet they have all the assets of a normal, what I would call here an intentional influencer. So I like to find influencers who are unaware, because I can save money and I can stand out on their channels. So I'll give you an example. In Atlantic, Canada, minor hockey, or sorry, not minor, but one step below the AHL hockey is a very popular thing. And all throughout those ranks, there are teams all across the Maritimes. And every one of those teams has a Facebook page and an Instagram account in all of these communities across Atlantic Canada and across Canada, frankly. We'd all be familiar with our local junior B team or whatnot. And they all are on social media. They all have pages. And they all have 10, 15,000 followers. They don't see themselves as influencers, but they totally are. And if I can convince them to talk about my product or my brand or the brand that we're representing, that's a win. That's me using an influencer. So that unaware marketplace is large, and it's an interesting space. It's not what we're really going to focus on today, but it's something to be aware of. So there's the traditional, there's the unaware, and then there's the intentional. Now, these are the people we're really going to talk about today. They're the ones that we think of when we consider the idea of an influencer. So I call them the intentional. They're the ones that are trying to be influencers, and they're trying to share influence. If we go to the next slide, this is how I see the intentional influencer. This person has an audience of followers or fans or subscribers. If it's Facebook, they have fans. If it's Instagram, they have followers. If they have a YouTube channel, they have subscribers. There are giant influencers on YouTube with hundreds of thousands of subscribers.
Yes, I learned about them from my kids every day.
Yes, if you're looking to speak to kids, YouTube is an excellent vehicle to do that. One of my good friends makes a very good living off of playing video games and recording himself playing video games and talking. And he posts all of those to YouTube. He has hundreds of thousands of subscribers, and that's how he makes his living. He makes money off of putting other people's brands into his video game stories. That's the world we're in now, folks. So an intentional influencer has an audience. That's a key thing. The second thing is they accept product or payment in exchange for bringing attention to a brand. So they're actually interested in monetizing their audience. And this is a big deal. It's a big differentiator. There are people who have influence who are not influencers. A lot of them are unaware. Some of them are aware, but are choosing not to be influencers. And those are folks who you can't necessarily buy into their space. The influencer that we want to focus on is someone who is interested in monetizing. They want to make money. They're interested in having conversations with brands and businesses and companies to share their stories. And the final thing about an influencer is they almost always create some sort of content: written, photo, video. Those are the three main ones. So they may write blog posts. They may write long form posts on Facebook or LinkedIn. They often focus on photography or video content. That's a big thing for an influencer. They're gonna be content creators. They're ubiquitous content creators. They tend to live their life online. And that's part of the reason they have the following that they have. I think we got one more slide here to sort of illustrate this, give you a sense of, in this category, I see there's sort of three genres or segments. There is the micro-influencer, which is, I say an audience of less than 2,500. It could be an audience of 250 people. It could be really, really micro, really small. But I said 2,500 as a rough space. These micro-influencers have a very narrow focus. They are intent on speaking and creating content about a singular topic, and they do it well. And they have a devoted fan base that follow them, engage with them, and engagement is they comment, they share their content. There's back and forth between the influencer and the audience. They're usually very personable, and they create very smart content. They're not interested in the masses. They just do their thing, and they're small. Now, often a micro-influencer will grow, but there's a whole burgeoning segment of micro-influencers. And if you're a smaller business, micro-influencers are a thing to look out for. They're usually more affordable, more accessible, and I really like the return that I get on working with them because their audience is they're the most engaged audience. So when that influencer talks about the product that I want them to talk about, I know that people are listening, and they're really listening. So I like the micro space, but the audience isn't very large. Think of it like a local community newspaper versus the Globe and Mail, right? Sure. So a micro influencer, everybody reads the local newspaper, or they used to. not everybody reads the Globe and Mail, but you can't beat the reach of a Globe and Mail nationwide. The normal influencer, that's your city newspaper. That's in Atlantic Canada, it's the Herald. It's large. It's got an audience somewhere between 2,500 and maybe 250,000 followers. They usually have a lifestyle focus, so they're sharing all parts of their lives. You see them in the morning creating content, posting to Instagram or to Facebook or to YouTube or wherever their channels are. You see them at lunch, you see what they're eating, you see who they're chatting with, who their friends are when they go on trips. And interspersed within all of that is really good content that they create. So you may see some really simple amateurish photos of them having coffee in the morning, but in the afternoon, they may have a beautiful shot that they spent an hour working on to get just right of them going to the beach or one of 100 different things. This segment is dominated by females. It's dominated by, frankly, very good-looking females, something to be mindful of. I'm not very comfortable with that, frankly. I'd like to see a lot more equity in this space, but it's just the nature of large audiences online tend to follow younger and all the conventions of what beauty is in our society. That is what tends to convalesce around these normal-sized influencers. They have high engagement, but it's not always two-way. So they'll post and people will comment a lot, but they don't necessarily go back and respond to all the comments. Unlike the micro-influencer who takes all those one-on-one conversations quite seriously. So that's sort of the normal influencer. That's who the majority of you are probably going to be chatting with and exploring working relationships with. Then there's the final group, endorsement. Back one, I'll just touch on endorsement. If you're thinking about the endorsement level, you likely already have an agency that you work with or a marketing company. I would hope you do. If you don't, visit thisismarketing.ca and let's chat. But the endorsement level is no different than it's been for the last 50 years. Finding someone who is a celebrity, a personality that a lot of people follow and like, and having them speak on your product's behalf. They have very large audiences. They're rather expensive, but they exist. So if you're a large brand, if you're Maple Leaf Foods, this is the category for you. You can afford to go to this level. If you one day want to be Maple Leaf Foods, you're looking at the normal section here, or the micro section. So I won't spend too much time on the endorsement side. Today, I'm really going to focus on micro and normal.
All right, thanks, Neil. That was a great definition. That you covered a lot of ground in that definition. So
we're all thinking of it the same way, right?
That's right, and I think it's not just a space where you can say here's one sort of simple way to define them. There are a lot of things going on in this space that people do need to be aware of, and finding that right fit is so important. So,
right.
So how do people start to build these online followings? So, I mean, it sounds like a great gig, right? You got free stuff and you're taking pictures of yourself going to the beach and all that. I mean, I don't know, maybe I should try to see if I can figure it out. But so how do they generate this following? How do they start? How do they get the momentum going?
Well, Peter, I'm going to burst your bubble a little bit here. You are already doing this. You are what I would refer to as a micro influencer. So you don't have a giant following, but you have one. It's growing. The idea of me joining you today, I was excited because I know that you've got great people that trust you and look to you for advice and your career's worth of perspective. So that you and I would share some time. I love that. That's right. How I'm hoping to grow my audience. If you look at my name down there, it says follow @brandsbytim. That's my social media handle, right? My name's Tim. Tim is This Is Marketing.
I figured that, yeah.
Yeah, but I did that on purpose because I want to grow my following, right? So in the most basic sense, influencers grow their following by existing and being out there in the space. They create content and they take part in the conversation that's happening on whichever channel they choose. By the way, if you're curious, what does he mean by channels? Different social media platforms are referred to as channels. Facebook's a channel, Instagram's a channel, YouTube's a channel, TikTok is a channel, very interesting channel, Snapchat's a channel. So how do they grow their audience? Well, they put themselves in positions like this, where they can get themselves in front of a group of people who don't know them. and they do that through a lot of different ways. They'll go to say we're talking about an Instagram influencer, someone who's growing their Instagram following. They'll find a piece of content that a lot of people are engaging with, and they'll engage with it. They'll comment and they'll say something interesting, something fun. And that causes people who are looking at the comments, and people read the comments. Right. People looking at the comments to say, oh, who's this person? And they tap and they look at their profile. That's step one, is to be out there and be part of the conversation. Second step is to have an interesting profile, whether it's your YouTube channel and all your videos, or your Facebook page and all your posts, or your Instagram and it's your grid or your stories. You got to have interesting content. It's got to be something that when I click to check you out, I'm interested. So that's sort of number two. The third thing they do is they pay a lot of attention to what's happening in the world, and the world being the social space. So every trend that's happening, every hashtag trend, every movement, they're engaged. They're creating content around that. They're using those hashtags to expose themselves to more and more people. The number one thing that they do, though, that I haven't said, is that they create good content. Number one. So good, that's a pretty objective question, right? Obviously, if it's funny, people like that. Humor is objective too, but they try to create humorous content, interesting, intelligent, insightful content. And the influencer space is dominated, as I said, by the millennial female, and a lot of the content they create is beauty related. So beautiful clothing, sometimes pictures of them in bathing suits and that sort of thing, which that's the reality. And I want everyone to be aware that that is a part of this industry, is the attention seeking that goes along with it. So it just, you want to be mindful of that before you just connect with any influencer. And I guess we'll get into that later, but that's sort of how they grow their audience. So it's complex and it's never ending, but they basically live their lives online. And
that's what I was going to say. It's 24/7 online, really, right? Yes. To generate the interest and awareness. So if I'm a food and beverage company and I'm now saying, okay, I like your definition. I want to find maybe a few of these micro influencers, and maybe I'm going to move into a little bit the bigger size as well. How do I figure out where they are, or how do I find the right one for me?
Right, it's a great question. It falls right along that mental process that people go through. And the reality is, so there's a couple ways to do it. You can go to like an agency. You could call us, or most agencies have existing relationships with influencers, and they have a database that they work with of influencers and that sort of thing. There are a lot of online tools, and I thought about providing some examples, but there are a lot of online tools, and I wouldn't put any above any, really. Some are paid, most are some sort of a fee structure, but you can search databases that are created.
So there are specific databases for influencers, and is it based on their community or based on, say, food, clothing, household goods?
Yeah, you can, it depends on the database, but you can search and segment based on industries, based on demographics. So a lot of variables. A quick time on Google, you're going to find lots of options there. I try to stay away from stuff that is easy to Google. So if you're looking for a technical solution, just Google how to find an influencer or influencer finding tools, and there's a lot of options out there. But I don't really like those. We don't really employ those here. What we tend to do is, it's harder. This is harder, what I'm going to describe, but I found it to be more effective. Look at your current customer on social media. Spend the time to explore who your current customer is. Well, there's a caveat here. If you're looking to grow your existing customer base and you just want more of your existing customers, then explore your current customers online. If you have a Facebook page, go and look at your fans on Facebook. Go look, really simple. Go and look who follows you on Instagram. The political world is dictated by polls. And so, we think we know who's going to win the next election based on the opinion of sometimes 700 people that were surveyed. And so you think, well, geez, that's not very many, but the polls are pretty accurate. So if you have 1,000 followers on Instagram or 10,000 followers, An afternoon looking at 100 of them and who they follow is not a bad poll. It's not a bad little look at, okay, what are the brands, what are the personalities that they follow? Who do they look at? Who do their friends look at and spend time with? Where are they commenting? I found that to be a really rich and an authentic way to find voices that fit. You know, there are the online tools which I mentioned, and they're okay, they're good, but it's you want to be rigorous and bring it back to, is this a fit for my brand? And so, just a couple words of warning: you really want to be concerned about fake follower counts. So I'm sure there'll be a question up here about how much should I be paying. Well, it has a lot to do with how many people are you reaching through their channel. And it's not uncommon for an influencer to have 10,000 followers, but in reality, 7,500 of them aren't really real. They're bots, and they're basically purchased followers. It's a thing. It's a real problem, and the best way to know that is to really dig into the influencers you choose. Go and look at them. Who is following them, and how much content are those people producing, and how much engagement are those people actually creating? If you're not seeing much engagement, there's a good chance that's not an authentic influencer.
I'm glad I'm checking my list all the time, because I've got no bots on my list, I don't think.
Yeah, it's something worth being dedicated to.
Right. Well, and if you're paying for based on 50,000, you know, sort of say it's a range between 50 and 70,000, and 25,000 of them are not real people, then yeah, it's you're not going to benefit from them at all.
No, exactly.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we can look at, I think it's a great suggestion to look at our own following on social media. I think that's a great idea, because we actually had a question that says, how do I find these people? So I think that's a great one, is to look at our own profile. You said there's some online tools that we can access to find them, but to make sure it's important to do the research, right? Because you want to find that fit, and I think that's a great point to make for people. So now that I've done my research, I've looked at my own following, and I've identified a few of these. When I'm looking at them, how, like I said, it sounds like a great gig to take a picture of myself going to the beach and then opening up a box with some different products in it, or making a supper and posting the recipe and different things. So how do these people earn a living doing this? Because we know that many of them do. So how do they earn that living?
Well, it's a good question. You got the slideshow there. Can you skip the next two slides and go right to the business model slide? I don't want to show people these other two slides. Nope. You didn't see those. You didn't see those. Keep going. Keep going.
Oh, further along?
Yeah.
There you go.
Good. There you go.
Oh man, I'm having a hard time. There we go.
It's all good.
I'll stop.
Yeah. So what are they selling? That's at the end of the day. That's what this boils down to. And the business model's not that complicated, really. They're selling you reach. They're selling you attention and eyeballs. By partnering with an influencer, they're going to talk about your stuff and put your product and brand in front of a lot of people. It's no different than buying an ad in the paper. Well, it's incredibly different than buying an ad in the paper, but in terms of what you're buying, that part's the same. You're buying reach, you're buying attention. They're also selling content. And it's pretty hard to walk 1 foot in the marketing industry this day without having a conversation about content. Content is king or queen, however you want to look at it, but content's incredibly important. We all know that, but it can be very expensive to create content. And I try to work with a lot of small businesses here. Like our goal here at This Is Marketing is to help small businesses grow. If I can get you from 3 employees to 6, I'm ecstatic, right? That makes me really, really happy. And there are content demands for social media on smaller businesses that is very difficult for them to achieve. Partnering with an influencer and a series of influencers, it gives you both reach and content. So they're actually creating stuff for you that you can then repurpose and use on your as part of blog posts. You can use it in print collateral. You can use it in all sorts of different ways, in addition to your own social media. So
Neil, is the content that the food business has, is that of value to the influencer as well? So if you have recipes that they can then use so that they don't have to recreate and that kind of thing, is that of value to them?
It can be. They're in the business of creating, right?
All
So
right.
if you can give them the breadcrumbs to show them exactly what you want, then that's great.
Mhm.
We actually work with a lot of influencers, actually with Tom's company, Superfruit Puree, to create a whole bunch of recipes. So if you, shameless plug for Tom's site, but if you go to superfruitpuree.ca, all of the content on that website is delivered by influencers. Almost all of the product photography, the recipes, the visuals of the recipes, everything is stuff we got by paying influencers, which we wanted to do anyway, right? So normally, I mean, how many people on this call have built a website in the last 5 years? And the developer said, okay, well, we need content for the website. And we need, so now you're doing a photo shoot, you're doing a lot of different things to create content. Well, we just bypassed that. We said, okay, let's pick the influencers that we like, the ones that have the right strategic fit for us and who make content that we like, and then let's repurpose their content on the website, saving 30, 40% on the project, right? So that content can be used in a whole bunch of different ways. And sometimes you're giving them the content, but it's better when they create it because their audience is used to their content, right? They don't want it to feel like an ad. So
Right.
the more it stems from their own creativity, their own style, the better off you're going to be. So there's reach, there's content creation, and then there's the magic, the backlinks, the credibility, the SEO. So you're getting if you think of traditional ads or traditional media, there's radio, and radio is a long-term investment. It's about repetition. It's about building a long-term connection. There's television, which is expensive. It's broadcast. It hits a lot of people quickly. And then there's print, and then there's like magazine print. And there's a big difference between newspaper print and magazine print ads. And all of those ad placements carry with them different degrees of credibility. Right, and so a lot of people in this call will know exactly what I'm talking about because that's been the world that we've all been in. In the social space, an influencer can give you credibility. The way a beautiful full-page magazine ad gives you more credibility than a newspaper ad, right? So you can create an ad for Facebook and put it out there, or and you get reach and people see your brand and you'll get some new followers, or you can work with an influencer. And what the influencer is doing is they're transferring their credibility to your brand. And you're basically borrowing their credibility. You're also getting backlinks to your social media accounts, probably to your website, which in turn helps your SEO. And then it's also giving you content and the things that we've talked about. So those are the sort of 3 high-level looks at what you're getting from an influencer. Yeah, I hope that covers it.
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting. And I think the content creation for me is a big part of it, and I think we probably underestimate the power of some of that because you pay for it, but then you can reuse it and reuse it, and the credibility piece is also interesting where they've spent a lot of time and effort to build this reputation within their community, and you do benefit from it. So that's interesting. So we've talked about a lot of different segments of this, and one question that did come up I saw there from Gary was just, do influencers have to disclose that they are benefiting from promoting your product?
Really great question. Yes, they are supposed to disclose that. There are tools within the major platforms for them to do so. So paid partnership content tag that sometimes goes on an Instagram post or on a Facebook post or on a tweet. Or they'll use it like a hashtag sponsored type scenario. This is a really great way to determine who you should and should not work with. So if there is someone who you think might be a good fit and you go look at their content and it's clearly that they're influencing, they're showing people products and that sort of thing,
Sure.
but they're not using a sponsored hashtag, or they haven't done the designation that this is a sponsored post, avoid them like the plague. You don't want that. Avoid them like COVID. I suppose now. You don't want to be near that. It's not good for them. They're going to get in trouble. At some point, they're going to get in trouble, and it could negatively impact your brand as well. People don't want to be manipulated. However, making it clear that this is a sponsored piece of content decreases the legitimacy of the content, which means that the creative itself has to be even better than it was before.
That's right, because then you're saying, well, did you get paid? Are you just saying that because you got paid, or are you saying it because you really like that particular product, or you really want to use it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. That's I think we'll probably get into a bit more about how to pick an influencer and what makes a good fit and all that stuff, and we'll explore it there, I suppose. But yeah, it really has been the Wild West.
Okay. So that actually was my next question, and I see Shivani put it in the chat as well. So her question was how to approach, and she said a micro influencer. But my question was sort of how do I get their attention? You know, do I just start sending stuff, or do I send money first, or what do I do, or do I praise them up online? I guess the different ways. So I'm curious as to how we get their attention.
Well, first thing I will say is, and maybe I should have said this off the very top, working with influencers is a labor-intensive exercise.
Is that like working with me?
No, you work with you, one phone call, you take care of the rest. And so you need to make a choice early on. Are you going to call someone like me and say, hey, I want an influencer campaign, and then we do all the legwork? Or are you going to do it on your own? Choosing one influencer one time is like putting one ad in a paper once, or it's not going to do a whole lot for you. You need to do a lot of influencers across a variety of sort of micro audience sets, and you need to try to repeat as much as you can, which means you need to reach out to a lot of influencers. I always say, if I'm trying to get 5 influencers, I'll probably develop a short list of 15 or 20, and I might approach 10 or 12 of them. So that's a starting point. And then from there, it's a lot of back and forth. It's individual bills, right? So there's a whole invoicing component that is labor intensive. Just be aware of that. It is labor intensive. So to the actual question though, how do I develop these relationships? Who do I talk to? Direct message. That is what I have found that to be the best vehicle. Don't try to get them to like you, right? This is business. They understand. If they're a professional influencer, they understand, and that you would like to work with them. Be persistent. Don't take silence as them not being interested. Take silence as them being disorganized. Okay? And a lot of them are disorganized because a lot of them, this isn't their job. This is a thing that they do in addition to their job. And so you gotta work at it, right? If you really think it might be a good fit, you gotta work at it. And so direct message to me has been the best. Some might respond right away and say, hey, please send me an email. Those are great. That means that they've thought it through already and they actually have a way that they want to talk to you. That's great. But in most instances, especially with the smaller influencers, you're going to be the one that needs to bring structure and bring organization and repetition. Keep coming back to them. Yeah. Often what I do is that's a good way for me to say no thanks to that person. Because I'd rather have someone who is organized and wants to work with me than someone who, yeah, they might be a good fit, but I got to do all the legwork. Yeah, no thanks.
Okay. And what about sending products? I think we all have this sort of, maybe, or I do anyway, that this sort of view that if I send them a box of products that magically it will get shown on video and they'll be all excited about it.
Yeah. Why don't I just send Ellen DeGeneres my product and then she'll tell everyone?
Exactly. Yeah, that's what yeah.
And then on the smaller scale, it depends on your product. We work with we've done a lot of work with a company called Piece by Chocolate. A lot of you probably know that brand. You send Piece by Chocolate to an influencer, there's a good chance they're going to do something with it because Piece by Chocolate already has an audience, and they want their stuff to get seen by the Piece by Chocolate audience just as badly as the Piece by Chocolate audience wants their stuff to be seen by this influencer's audience. But if you're a brand that isn't very sexy, or a brand that nobody really knows about, you don't have much of a following, I wouldn't just send them stuff because there's no benefit to them. to share that story. If your product's interesting, yeah, I would consider it. And if you could do it and it wouldn't cost you a fortune, yeah, I would consider that. But yeah, if your product is sort of just a normal, everyday consumer product, I would think about that before I just gave away my product influencers. They do get a lot of stuff. Plus, you got to get their mailing address, which isn't easy anyway. So you're going to have to do a little sleuthing to get that.
I actually found, which to me was interesting, because Susan, who works with me here at SKUFood, when we were looking at saying we wanted to have somebody who does work sort of as an influencer, which we do have, Kayla Short, who's an influencer in Halifax, and she's
excellent choice.
So I'm really looking forward to having her. So she's going to be with us on July 15th, and but they're not easy people to get a hold of. They're
ironic.
That's what I said. I mean, they're people who communicate and build a community for a living, but they're tough to get in touch with. So,
yeah.
So you're saying reach out, be direct about it, tell them that you're interested in working with them, show what you have to offer them as well, because it does need to be a win-win, right?
That's a great. I'm so glad you mentioned that. It's don't come to them and say, "Hey, this is superfruit puree." The lighting isn't the greatest here, but this is my superfruit puree. Hey, can we work together? Right? What you want to do is think about why you want to work with them in the first place, and what it is you'd like them to do with the product, and some examples of stuff they've done similarly in the past that looked cool and that you liked. They're interested in creating content that their audience is going to enjoy, their audience is going to comment on, and their audience is going to share with others, because they're in the business of maintaining and growing their audience. So if you want to work with an influencer, yeah, it's a lot of legwork, but you also have to come with ideas of why it's a good fit. The kryptonite for an influencer is inauthenticity, right? What makes an influencer work? Authenticity, trust. If they're just shilling products left, right, and center, it never works. Kayla Short is a great example of someone who shills a lot of product, but does a very good job of choosing the products that she works with, and does a very good job of doing that work authentically. And that's not easy to find. Not easy at all. So,
all right. Well, we'll see whether she shares her email address on the for success.
She's great, easy to get a hold of, and Danielle, who has worked here, she was our social lead. She finally one day met her, and she said, she came back to the office and she said, "It was like I met a unicorn."
Yeah, really.
If you get the chance to meet Kayla Short, she's very sweet. She's smart, sweet, and talented.
Good. So, Neil, this is always the fastest hour of the week for me. So I know you had some examples. I know you had some examples. There are a couple more questions, but do you want me to put those examples up so you can just talk to them? All right, I'll put them up so you can just talk to them, and then there are a couple more questions there. So
I'll just use this quick one as an example, and I'm using Superfruit Puree because I knew Tom was going to be here today, so I figured I gotta promote my client.
Client relations.
That's right. So this is Rose on the Coast. She's an influencer here in Halifax. So she's got over 10,000 Instagram followers. When we did this work with her, I think she had somewhere in the vicinity of 6,000. So it's improved considerably in the last, I think 6 or 7 months. But so we approached her and we said, "Hey, we love what you do," and we had a whole reason for why we were working with her, and we communicated that. And we thought that this product would be a good fit for her audience. It's very healthy. She's very health focused. It's tasty, and she likes baking food and making things and whatnot. What do you think? Would you be open to this? Yeah, she comes back. We go back and forth, and we decide she's going to make a sangria drink out of this product, which is delicious, by the way. And the recipe is on the superfruitpuree.ca website. And so she shares this content. So this post got over 20 comments, which was good. It got hundreds of loves on Instagram. The Superfruit Puree account got over 50 new followers because of this post, which was really, really great. And then a couple days later, she shared the next one, which was a surprise to us. It was awesome. And this is what influencers will do that is really, really great. They put their own creative spin on these things. They have their own voice. And the main reason you want to take your time and pick the right influencers is you need to trust them. And you need to trust them with your brand. And so look at what they've done in the past and make sure that you're comfortable with it. But what Rose did is she went and she made this face mask like out of honey and the puree and a couple of other things. And this just blew up. It did really, really well on social media. And it showed us a totally new avenue for this brand. Obviously, we're not going to promote this product as a facial mask thing, but it started the mice in the brain thinking about maybe we should be getting into a different sector here. And we would never have thought of that without the partnership with this influencer. So it's just a good example of how they'll surprise you sometimes. And you got to be open-minded to their surprises. That's the value that they bring. Mm-hmm. Can't remember what else I shared with you. So this is, I'm just sort of keeping on the superfruit puree theme. This is all content from influencers. So this is, if you scroll through the superfruit puree Instagram feed, this is what you're going to see. And this is all content, beautiful product photography with recipes for all of these delivered to us for the price of our traditional media buy. So if we had went out and bought normal ads, we would have gotten just the ad time. We still would have had to have produced the ads and done all the work to deliver that sort of content. Instead, we worked with influencers. They gave us delicious recipes, unbelievable photography that we're using to this day. We're using in the trade show right now to turn people's heads.
So I did see a question about pricing, and how do you figure out pricing in this arena, Neil? It's not like you can look at the Globe and Mail rate sheet anymore. So how do you figure it out?
Great question. This is another one of the reasons why if I need 5 influencers, I'm making a list of 20. I'm reaching out to 12 or 13 of them, and I'm going to try to facilitate those relationships to get a sense of what they're interested in charging. So you want to compare apples and apples. And the problem is influencers all feel as though they are unique. And in many ways, yes, they are. They have their own style, their own audiences. But reach is reach, and engagement is engagement. And what is a $10,000 what is a 10,000 person follower charge for a single post? Well, if you're Ali and Sam, so if you go to the next slide, if you're Ali and Sam, 2 very famous influencers from the city here in Halifax, you might spend $1,000 on a single post for Ali and Sam, and that $1,000 might get you 300 new Instagram followers or fans on Facebook. But if you're Rose on the coast, you might only charge $50 for a post. It really depends. And so you got to take the time to speak with the influencer, learn about their rates, and ask them questions. Who is your audience? Just because they have 100,000 followers doesn't mean that the place where your product is retailed actually is the same place where all those followers live. So Ali and Sam have a large audience that a lot of them aren't in Atlantic Canada. So when we talked to them, we said, well, we don't want to pay that rate because we're not really accessing, like our product isn't distributed across Canada and through the States right now. So we don't want to pay for that kind of reach. So they gave us a different price, right? So it's about knowing who their audience is and ask. That's part of what you can do. You can say, well, give us a sense of your analytics. And if they don't want to share any of that stuff, they're either really, really big and famous and you're just annoying them, or they don't know it because they're not organized enough, or it's not very good to begin with. So those are all red flags if they're willing to share that info. Okay. But yeah, the pricing can really vary. We've paid as little as nothing for a post before, many times actually, where we just give them the product, and but we knew what to expect, right? We didn't expect giant reach. We expected maybe a couple good photos, which was what we got, and that was great. And we paid $1,500. I paid $1,500 for one post before, and
that return on investment is you get the content, but you're also looking for interaction with people in their community about your product, about your brand. Can you ever tie it right to sales? Sorry, that's the retailer coming out of me. I'm like, what about the cases, right? Can you tie it right to sales, or is it really about the engagement online and then it's the brand's job to build the sales?
Yeah, it's if you're doing a one-off, if you just do one influencer post one time, you're going to see things like a bump in followers, maybe a jump in people to your website, and that's all I'd expect. If you do an influencer campaign, and that's where you're doing work with several influencers, probably spending more than $5,000 in a month, If you're doing that sort of campaign, and you could spend upwards of 50,000 in a month, it really depends on how big you are. At that level, you should be able to see it in the grocery store. I say grocery because most of the folks in this call are grocery, but if you're spending more than $2,000 or $3,000 a month on influencers, you should be able to see that change in the grocery store. The challenge is ensuring that that growth in sales in the store is connected to the influencer work that you're doing. And now we're back to problems that the marketers always face is, we did this, this, and this. Which one created the sale? Well,
that's right. Yeah.
But you should see a connection. It's not a direct line, but you should be able to see growth.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And Neil, one thing I always do is I always try to finish with some good news about the food industry. And this sort of topic, or this segment of our Recipes for Success is evolving as the marketplace changes. And the good news in March and April was different than it is today. So I'm just going to share a couple of pieces here that I've found, and then we'll wrap it up and see if we've got any more questions. So the first couple of pieces of good news that I wanted to share this week was that Amazon, who just a small online retailer that has popped up and done probably trillions more in the last few months, but credit to Amazon, they did make a donation to Food Banks Canada of $1.25 million to try and help people in need across Canada, and their donation was targeted at communities where Amazon does have fulfillment centers or offices in Canada. So it's nice to see them giving back in a time when they've probably been very busy. Another one that I thought that was interesting to me, and obviously not as large as Amazon, but these are this is one of the leading home delivery pet food companies in Canada. And when the whole COVID-19 struck and places like vets were either forced to close or some did close because of the contact and interaction with people, Cabo Health set up an online portal for pet owners to communicate with vets. So if your dog or cat was sick or you were concerned about them, you could go onto their portal, which was free. You didn't have to be a customer. It was open to anybody who was a pet owner. And they would do an online consult with vets that they paid for. So I thought that was kind of an interesting way to build your brand and awareness in a challenging time. And we know that pets are part of the family, and if you can't get in to see your vet, you'd be concerned. So I thought that was an interesting thing that company did. And also another example of somebody making a change is Cisco. So we know that the whole food service industry in Canada was and around the world was really decimated with COVID-19, with restaurants shutting down. And Cisco made a big change in their business, and they're actually now servicing your home. So they'll do home delivery of some of the products that they would have always been selling to restaurants. So might be different sizes than you're used to, but we always hear the word in the food industry about restaurant quality. So now you can access the items that Cisco would have been selling to different food service establishments. So it's another way for them to try to generate some volume in a time when they really had a huge impact on their business. So Cisco are now doing that. And if you're on Facebook, you've probably seen some of the ads. And the last good news I wanted to share was from Merit Functional Foods in Manitoba. So this was just on the news and was shared. Sylvain Charlebois shared some of it. But where they announced a significant, I think it's $100 million in funding from a number of different sources. And actually, when I was reading the news articles, I didn't put this on here because of it, but when I was reading the news articles, I did see that FCC are one of the funding partners for Merit Functional Foods. But the interesting thing for me was that they're building this state-of-the-art facility, which will produce different plant-based proteins. So pea protein and the first in the world canola-based protein for the food industry. So this is how our marketplace is changing, where consumers are looking for different protein sources. And Merit Functional Foods in Manitoba is a world-leading company who are making a big investment in this area. And we'll see that they said that their facility will be functioning in December 2020. And so that's pretty exciting. And I think that we'll see more and more products in that plant-based protein area. So it's nice to see some people making investments during challenging times and seeing that there is a future. And one of the great things about food is people do have to eat, but it's great to see these businesses making investments in our Canadian food industry, and that they will produce, or I guess process, 10,000 metric tons of peas and 17,000 tons of canola seed and employ 80 people. So that's a pretty big success story for Manitoba. Exciting to see. So that's some of the good news that we had. I'm just going to check and see, Neil, if we've got any more questions from.
There was yeah, Shivani's got a question here. I just noticed it's, are there other ways other than just Googling? One thing you can do is, I mean, if, for instance, go on Instagram and just search #sponsored. Because most influencers are posting content with that hashtag, and you can do that across a variety of platforms. If you're Googling, you're not looking, don't Google for individual influencers. Google for databases that allow you to search influencers. There's usually a fee associated with that, but you may really thank yourself for paying that fee before you dig into the time it would take to do it all on your own. But again, start with your existing audience. Look to see who they are following, the influencers that they are following. That's the gold mine. That's where you're going to find folks who you know your audience already likes. And Shivani, I see you had a few different questions there. Don't hesitate to direct message me at Brands by Tim, and if you want, I can hop on a call or whatever. We can just chat it out. Not a big deal.
Great, and I want to thank everybody for all the questions. I think we addressed a lot of them as we were going through, and Neil, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate your great insights into all this, because it is a really developing and growing area for our food industry to connect with communities and connect online with consumers and ultimately lead to sales. And it's great to really get some more insights. So we look forward to next week when we're going to talk about telling your story. And I know that Neil does a great job telling the story of a lot of the brands that he works with. And I'm going to try to help people understand, give them a little bit of a process as to how you can tell that story effectively, not just talk about what's in your product, but tell the story effectively. And oh, we're getting a photo up here.
Yeah, I gotta put it on my Instagram story. We did this.
I always try to, now when I see people do that, I'm like, I gotta look good, because usually I don't look that good when people do that. So so I'll look for that later, and I'll have to share it. But thank you, Neil, so much for being with us today. Really appreciate your time. Thank you for everybody who is with us today. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us on our Recipes for Success, which are presented by FCC. And it's really great to have people from the whole food community here with us. So have a great week, and we look forward to seeing you on July 8th. We're going to take a week off for July 1st. It's a holiday in Canada next week, so hopefully everybody, I'll take a picture of myself going to the beach, right?
There you go. Oh, that'll perform very well.
I don't think so.
Get a little leg in there, Peter.
Yeah, right. I don't think so. Maybe I'll take no. Anyway, we will see you on July 8th. Really look forward to it, and thank you for being here with us today.
Folks.